On today's show, big decisions for the Capitals to make at the draft next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Caps have some big decisions to make as the draft is Friday. Can you believe it's kind of sneaking up on us here a lot sooner than I think a lot of us thought, or that's the way time goes. What will the Capitals do at the draft? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about third round swings. I'm talking about Ryabkin and Gästrin. Would either one of those players be a good option for the Capitals? A bit later, we'll talk about a second round goalie reach. You take a look at the goalie pipeline for the Capitals. It is Clay Stevenson, who is the Caps' top prospect in the organization there. But do they need to restock the pond a bit, if you will? I'll talk about that. But just to get it going here, the biggest question, I think, for the Capitals in the draft is pick number 27, hold it or move it. And, it's a bit different for the Capitals this season as they don't have as high of a draft pick as they've had in the past season or so here. So the pick that they have is going to be good, but not nearly as great as, let's say, when they drafted Ryan Leonard. A lot of it at this point, it's just about who's going to be left. And, you take a look at Andrew Crystal. He wasn't drafted where many people thought. You take a look at Ivan Ryabkin, a guy that the Capitals kind of took a flyer on or a bet on him, if you will. So I guess a lot of it remains to be seen on who is available. Some of the things that we know about the Capitals is they are looking for a right shot defenseman as John Carlson enters into his final season under his current contract, that we need to start having our eyes fixed on the future. And also, when you just take a look at the Capitals blue line in general, and you saw what it meant when Marty Faravari got injured, that I think they need a bit more depth there. Also, you take a look at the center position. We need centers for the future as well, and a goalie, like I said. So let's dive into that in segment number 1 here. Pick number 27, hold it or move it. And, like I say, we're officially in a draft week, and the NHL draft is going down on Friday. Again, it's kind of snuck up really quick, and the Caps, they're heading into this thing with a lot of different options, like a lot. And, you take a look at it, I'm kind of leaning towards just going for taking that as draft capital and acquiring an NHL-ready player. Because, there are a lot of questions on the Capitals lineup that I would prefer NHL-ready talent versus, a late pick there. So I think that that's my take on it anyway. Now, the Caps own the 27th overall pick. That's after they got bounced by Carolina in round 2. And now the big question is, do they even use it? And I guess, you take a look at Chris Patrick, Brian McClellan, those kind of guys, they're going to have the phones going and see what their options are and see who is ultimately available. I mean, there are 3 legit routes that the Caps could take here. And honestly, all of them make sense depending on how aggressive Chris Patrick wants to be. That's kind of my hunch that, they could, and I'll talk about the options a little bit later, but that is what I would want to go with is some NHL ready talent. So option 1, of course, is they stay at 27 and make a pick. Option 2, they trade up or down depending on how hard the board falls. That obviously they want the best player available. And, that's one of the things is it's important, I think, not to draft a certain player just based on that you're looking for a goalie, or you're this or that. You want to draft the best player that's available at the selection that you have available. Now, and of course, option 3, they package it in a deal for NHL-ready help. This is the one I would circle and highlight here. And honestly, that one feels real tempting right about now. And we talk about the moves that are going to be made ostensibly on July 1st. And maybe it wouldn't be so difficult if they had some draft capital that they could use, something of that nature to make a deal that way. That, I think, is what makes it a little bit more tempting. Now, let's say they do make the pick. Who do they sign and who do they go after? Well, if you take a look, the teams drafted 5 straight forwards in the first round. We're talking Tarek Parasek, Ryan Leonard, Ivan Mirshnyshenko, Hendrik Lapierre, Connor McMichael. That's 5 in a row. And a little bit later, I'll talk about why I do think the Capitals need to prioritize a defenseman if, in fact, a good defenseman is available. So, yeah, it's probably time to reinvest on the blue line for the reasons I listed. Like I said, to circle back, John Carlson contract year, TVR contract year. And I want depth, and however that manifests itself, and you take a look at, you enter in Brzustewicz, right-handed defenseman, London Knights, OHL. He's not flashy, but he's efficient, big guy, 6'2", puck mover, played alongside Sam Dickinson, scored 42 points, +9 in the playoffs. So Brzustewicz is a good option. And, taking a look into this, it is a bit of a daunting task, especially since they're lower picks on, who I think the Capitals would be best selecting. And a lot of it is just who's available. That's what it comes. If you are in the upper first round, then you can kind of pick it a little bit more. Like a couple seasons ago when I was talking about Ryan Leonard and was it going to be, this player, that player, the Capitals ultimately ended up selecting Ryan Leonard. So that's a little bit of a different take. When you get later in this thing, that's when it can become a little bit more difficult. But, all things considered, that is one of the strong suits of the Capitals for years, is finding that right guy. Have done it. I have the utmost faith in the Capitals and the organization making these great picks. And let me say this, a right shot defensemen are gold in this league. So that is why I think if they can, if available, that's what they do. If you take a look at it, Brzustewicz could be a smart future fit, like long-term second pair guy to play with someone like Cole Hutson, for example. That is a nice combo right there. So that's what you're doing. You're kind of trying to look into it. Who's available? That's an intriguing name, has a good upside, could see him in a Capitals jersey in years to come. I definitely like the feel of it. Now, if they don't use the pick and decide to trade it, look, the team still needs a top 6 forward. We know that. And preferably someone who can play center or wing, because we know what about Connor McMichael? He could very well end up playing that third line center position. And I understand, when you're dealing with later picks, it's not, necessarily going to be NHL ready talent right out of the gate. But if that's what I'm talking about, if they trade it, that they could potentially have an NHL ready player that is ready to go, like Jack Roslovic, like I talked about, who can play center and wing. But a guy that brings real offensive skill, and they're also trying to get younger. They have taken steps in that direction. Not too long ago, a season or so, they were one of the older teams in the league, and just based on necessity, with Backstrom and Oshie and Kuzi departing for various reasons, they have added some younger pieces. And another name that keeps circling out there is JJ Peterka. Or even a disgruntled RFA that's dangled out there. But JJ Peterka is an intriguing one for me. I could see him being a fit. It's just not going to be easy to make that one happen. I think the Roslovic deal seems to be a bit more easier to accommodate. But big questions, and keep it locked to Locked On Capitals, as I expect a lot of news taking place within the next couple of weeks. We have the draft, and one of my favorite times of year, free agency. So that is what has me excited about free agency on July 1st. The other one, of course, is the trade deadline as well. 2 really exciting times. Third, if you consider the draft. So it's tough to make the call here, but Chris Patrick even said it. He said, quote, "You get a sense for what's there, and sometimes it's duplicative of what you already have." unquote. So translation, if there's nobody unique left on the board, don't force it. Move the pick. Go get a guy that fills the need now. Again, that is my hunch. That is what they're ultimately going to end up doing. You stick around, and that's what we're going to talk about all this week. Is we're going to talk about the various pieces that could get moved in, and just continue to kind of pontificate on who the Capitals could ultimately select at the draft. It is an exciting time, and if you're watching or listening to this show, I got to think that you are really into it as well. All right, so coming up here after the break, we're talking about the Capitals potentially reaching out and trying to draft a goalie. It seems like they do that on a regular basis. Who might they be targeting? I'll discuss next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. And isn't that important? You wake up, you eat some cereal that just really doesn't do it. You eat a donut, or on your lunch break, you eat a bag of chips or something like that, and it leaves you unsatisfied. Instead of reaching for one of those junk snacks, why not reach for some Wonderful Pistachios and add some protein and help you keep feeling full at work all day long? Now, personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack, whether I'm on my desk, taking the kids out on a trail, whatever the case might be. And if you need a quick protein boost, they're my go-to snack. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options, well, they are a classic favorite as well. So a win-win. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps, and you'll have to forgive the background. I just got done wrapping up my Nationals podcast. I'm like, hey, it's summer. Just why not? It's the Nationals. It's DMV area. Let's go. So I assume that there are some Nationals and Capitals fans. So you'll have to forgive me, I guess, if you will, for the background if you're watching this on the YouTube side. But let's dive into segment 2. And could the Capitals be reaching out for a goalie? And you take a look at the questions out there that we know that Hunter Shepard very well could be on the move. So let's dive into that in segment 2, talking about the Capitals and could they possibly be interested in a netminder. So let's talk goaltending because it's been a minute since this team truly invested in a high-end netminder prospect. I know there's been some of them, but I think that having the goalie of the future is something to think about. You take a look at it, Clay Stevenson, the belief within the organization, I think still is true, is he is the guy of the future. The future, I'm going to go ahead and put in quotes here because, what do we know? LT's locked up long-term. Chucky's here for the next several years. That the future is a bit ambiguous. So Clay Stevenson, another one is Nicholas Kempf. Those are your top goalie prospects. And look, I like Kempf, good size, solid movement. But is he a future starter? Like when you ask this question, like a legit 50-game guy. And to that question, I'm not sure. And the one thing I love about the Capitals, talking Ross Mahoney and his crew, is they always have a knack for drafting great netminders when you don't see it. I think back not too long ago when it did appear that the Capitals were all done at the draft. And they're like, no, we are going to draft a goalie, Antoine Keller. If you can recall that one. And he is another guy that's taken a couple steps up on the rung of the goalie ladder as well. Another exciting name to watch. I love talking netminding if you don't know. But if you want to talk about another guy, Alexei Medvedev, from the Golden Knights. I know that would be 2 picks from the same team. But what are some of the things that we know? Well, the London Knights are kind of a knockout. But London wins for a reason. So why not bringing some of that winning culture to the Capitals organization? They develop talent. Medvedev's numbers are pretty good. If you take a look at it, 22, 8, and 2, that's pretty good. Sign me up for that. A 2.79 goals against and a 912 save percentage. Now, the questions around the Capitals, of course, is that we know that LT signed up for the long term. Will he play out the duration of that contract? Maybe, probably not, if I'm going to take a guess. And Charlie Lindgren, at some point, let's be honest, he could get traded at some point. So I think it is the wise decision to make to have your eyes fixed for the future. Now, pick number 37, that might feel a little high, but if you wait, he's gone. Guaranteed the next goalie tier drops off hard. And that's the hard part, is getting NHL-ready talent in the net minding department. And I know it's hard. And that's one of the things that I marvel at with Mahoney and his guys and Chris Patrick and Brian McClellan, is the ability to see beyond the horizon, like the horizon of the horizon, because you know who the guys on the pecking order of the Capitals net minding tier is. So you're kind of trying to look way deep into the future. But I think that if you look at Medvedev, I think he is a good option. Now, the kid is 6'3", prototypical modern day NHL netminder, athletic, calm in the net. You know, Braden Holtby vibes going on there in that regard, as far as the athletic and calm in net. And, you know, I watched some tape on him, and I like the way that he battles. When I do these shows, I got to prep and, you know, just, again, when they're late picks, sometimes you need to really kind of look into it. And with him, I'm going to say there is some competitiveness to his game, and the Caps could really use that in their future pipeline for sure. And of course, I'm intrigued by all the other names between here and there, that if you could add, a Medvedev to that goalie pool, if you will, I think that it's just going to be one of the best pools in the NHL. Again, if you want a starter caliber goalie, you either draft one early or you spend $5 million a year on one later. And, you know, the Capitals have had some good netminders that have come through the ranks. You know, Holtby, Neuwirth, Grubauer, all these guys that have, you know, a long history of doing great things, kind of just working their way up through the organization there. And Holtby, again, my favorite all-time Capitals netminder, well, he cut his teeth with the Hershey Bears as well. So, you know, you take a look at it. I think that if you take a look at the pool for the Capitals, it is really good. And the development that we have with the Stingrays at some point and with the Hershey Bears is next level. Now, the Capitals depth chart now is fine, but this would give them a real future starter candidate. Because, you know, I talked about Kempf, you know, and I talked about Clay Stevenson, but how old is Clay Stevenson going to be by the time, you know, that LT contract ages out like a carton of milk? Or, you know, Charlie Lindgren, that, you know, is he still going to be the guy? Is that going to be the perception that he still is our guy? That you have to even factor that in. It is like, you know, these guys are playing chess while we're playing checkers here. I'm not going to lie to you, because you have to factor in netminders aging out. You know, and how great is Clay Stevenson going to be, you know, like I said, by the time that's all done? And what is Kempf going to be the guy? And Antoine Keller and all these guys, right? That I think that you really have to just look at this from a 30,000-foot view and just tip your hat to these guys that make the decision. But again, I know that I do a Capitals podcast, and I think I'm fairly candid with you guys all the time on this show, maybe a little bit too honest. I say this with all honesty and sincerity, that the Capitals crew that does the drafting, Mahoney and Patrick and all these guys that are associated, the scouts that are out there, next level elite. I have no doubt that they will make the absolute best decision possible. All right, so coming up here after the break here, we'll talk about third round swings. We're talking about Ryabkin and Gästrin. Would those be good options? Let's dive into the weeds straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in segment 3 here, we're talking about some potential third-round swings. We are talking about Ryabkin and Gästrin. That those would be some intriguing options as well. Again, we're talking a little bit further down. The talent is not as cooked as some of the talent I've talked about in this episode. So let's take a couple steps down the ladder here and talk about some talent that could ostensibly be a good fit for the Capitals. So the Cap sticks with their third rounder. They've got a shot to take a massive swing at number 91 or so. So let me introduce you to Ivan Ryabkin. And this kid has a high ceiling, is what I'm going to say. Played in 3 different Russian leagues before landing in Muskegon in the USHL, and another guy with a good upside. And if you want proof in the pudding, since January, dude was a point per game. Then he helped Muskegon to win the Clark Cup. So you want to talk about a center option, that would be another option. But if you want to talk about analytics, if you want to talk about the back of his hockey card, we're talking 30 points in 27 games and 16 points in 14 playoff games. That's some serious production. Teams are going to pass on him because he bounced around the league and didn't have the cleanest development path. But I think if the Capitals can sniff that one out a little bit, I think that's pretty good. And the upside, first round skill. If he falls to the third, Capitals need to pounce on that. So, it's going to all, again, I've been surprised in the draft before. I'm talking, in recent memory, I'm talking Ivan Ryabkin, I'm talking about Crystal, that I have been surprised. So I think that would be another good option. And one more name here, because I'm kind of just throwing you the best options I think the Capitals could pick. Another name I love is Milton Gästrin, Swedish center, responsible two-way player. Wears the C for his junior team, played SHL games at just 17. Those guys that are just next level at a young age, those intrigue me. Like, if they're that good at that level, imagine how well they'll play at the NHL level when fully cooked. Now, take a look at him. Not the flashiest guy, but like a glue type player that I think has a really good offensive upside. He's got leadership and that motor and the skating to stick around in the league for a long time. And that's just watching video footage and kind of reading the backstory on him. And even if the offense doesn't pop, he's probably still a middle 6 contributor. And hey, if you want to take a look at it, he's from Sweden, and the players that come from there, Peter Forsberg, the Sedins, Victor Hedman, and you know the track record. A lot of excellent players, our very own Nicholas Backstrom, if you want to know, have come from Sweden, and they produce some really great players. So some intriguing names. And of course, keep it locked to Locked On Capitals, as I will have you guys covered the entire way. But that's the things. Those are just kind of, peeking into it. And, my hunches. And this show was, a few days in the making, because it's difficult. When it's earlier in the draft, oftentimes it's easier, like I say, to drill down on, maybe the Capitals should go after, Matvei Mishkov, if you remember that, around the time that Ryan Leonard got drafted. That, once you get later like this, I think that it gets a little bit more difficult. But the players that I covered tonight, I tried to keep it a wide spread, whether I was talking about forwards, defenders, and even net minding, if you can believe it, that we're still talking about net minding. It seems like the Capitals draft a netminders almost annually, doesn't it? But like I talked about in this show, to actually get a netminder that is, ostensibly the future face of your organization, that is quite an accomplishment. And I think that they would have that great option. But as far as, just to recap here, that pick number 27, I'm going to go ahead and say if they can get some NHL-ready talent for that, I would say go ahead and jump on that. Of course, depending on who that might be. But I like it, and I think that the Capitals are going to even be better developmentally. Of course, sometimes teams really make some stinker picks. I cover the NFL and Major League Baseball, and sometimes they kind of disappoint me. Like, really? That's what you picked? So I think that the Capitals have some excellent options ostensibly available. I guess it remains to be seen actually who they pick. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week. Available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.